Germany didn't begin like most nations. It wasn't born, it was assembled, from rivers, dialects, and broken crowns. It's not a country with a single origin point, but a continent's worth of collisions squeezed into one landscape. What we now call Germany was once a tangle of tribes, then of duchies, then of philosophies. The Roman Empire marked its edge at the Rhine and never dared push too deep. Charlemagne tried to unite it with swords and sermons. Later emperors ruled in name, but every hilltop kept its own banner. The land was fertile, of soil and of thought. Printing presses, reformations, revolutions, all sparked here. But unity came late, and at a cost. In the 19th century, a patchwork of states was hammered into a single empire by blood and iron. In the 20th, that empire would collapse, then mutate, then split, then reunite, leaving behind legacies too heavy to bury. Today, Germany is a pillar of modern Europe, but behind its autobahns and balance sheets are scars from fascism, division, and the ever-fracturing pressure of what it means to be German. So how did this land of thinkers and soldiers, reformers and ruin, become the engine room and conscience of the modern West? We begin where the forests still remember Rome. Long before Germany was an idea, it was an edge, a boundary of ice and empire, forest and floodplain. The landscape was shaped by deep time. During the Ice Ages, glaciers carved out valleys, deposited lakes and pushed mountains into shape. As the ice retreated, the land bloomed. Dense oak and beech forests, wild rivers like the Rhine, Danube and Elbe, arteries that still structure the country today. By 7000 BCE, Neolithic farmers had arrived, clearing patches of forest, planting einkorn wheat, raising cattle. Later, Bronze Age societies buried their elites in massive earthen mounds and built hill forts with clear territorial logic. But there was still no Germany, just tribes, climates, and slowly hardening identities. By the 1st century CE, Roman legions had pushed deep into this wilderness, attempting to bring the forests into the fold of civilization. They called it Germania, a name that wasn't tribal or native, but invented by outsiders, a Roman label for the ungovernable. At Teutoburg Forest in 9 CE, 3 Roman legions were ambushed and annihilated by a coalition of Germanic tribes led by Arminius, a former Roman ally turned rebel. It was more than a battle, it was a boundary line. Rome never again tried to conquer east of the Rhine. What emerged instead was a frontier region, not conquered, but not cohesive either. Dozens of tribes, Cherusci, Suebi, Marcomanni, Saxons, Franks, spoke similar tongues, traded and warred, but held no flag. Still their names, customs, and mythologies were beginning to take root. The soil that would someday carry cathedrals and tanks was still tribal, oral and mobile, but its forests remembered. Its rivers carried stories. And even as Rome built walls to keep it out, the seeds of something enduring were beginning to grow, in language, in land, and in resistance. Germany didn't form as a kingdom, it formed as a compromise. After the fall of Rome in the 5th century, the Western Empire fractured into warlord territories. But in the former Roman province of Gaul, a new power rose: the Franks, a Germanic people who would build the foundations of Christian Europe. In 800 CE, their king, Charlemagne, was crowned Holy Roman Emperor by the Pope, anchoring a medieval vision of a unified Christian Europe under Latin law and Germanic sword. But Charlemagne's empire didn't last. Upon his death, his lands were divided among heirs, and what would become Germany splintered east of the Rhine into duchies and bishoprics, loosely bound under the Holy Roman Empire. Neither holy nor Roman nor an empire, as Voltaire would later quip. From the 10th to the 13th centuries, the region known as Germania was a sprawling mosaic of semi-independent principalities. Kings were elected, not inherited. Power was shared with electors, archbishops, and barons. The emperor's authority reached only as far as his army or papal approval could carry him. Feudalism ruled the land. Loyalty was local. Still, patterns emerged. The Ottonian and Salian dynasties fortified imperial ambitions. The rise of monasteries and cathedral cities, Mainz, Cologne, Regensburg, tethered power to the church. German became a written language. Trade routes formed between towns, birthing the Hanseatic League, a confederation of merchant cities that would dominate Baltic commerce. And then came a quiet intellectual revolution. Martin Luther, in 1517, nailed his theses to a church door in Wittenberg, igniting a fire that split Christendom. What began as a theological protest unravelled centuries of papal authority. The Protestant Reformation, born in the German heartland, exploded across Europe. Suddenly religion wasn't a unifier, it was a sword. Princes picked sides, not just by faith, but by opportunity. The wars that followed, culminating in the 30 Years' War, 1618 to 1648, left German lands shattered, towns depopulated, fields burned. At its worst, some regions lost a third of their population. Europe's bloodiest religious conflict was fought largely on German soil. And yet Germany still wasn't a nation. It was hundreds of states, free cities, ecclesiastical domains, and knightly orders, some no larger than a town square. There was no Berlin, no flag, no singular identity. But a memory was forming, of fragmentation, of survival, of power diffused and reclaimed. The Holy Roman Empire limped on, a ghost in golden robes. And underneath it all, a question began to take shape. What would it take to make these scattered lands into one country? The answer would arrive not in parchment or prayer, but in iron and fire. By the early 1800s, the Holy Roman Empire was dead. Napoleon Bonaparte had marched through the German states like a knife through soft clay. In 1706, after centuries of ceremonial rule, the last emperor abdicated. What remained was a vacuum and a growing desire among German-speaking people for something stronger, modern, unified. But what kind of Germany? A liberal republic of brothers? A conservative monarchy of order? In 1815, the Congress of Vienna stitched together a German confederation, 39 states yoked together by treaties, diplomacy, and mistrust. The biggest were Austria and Prussia, two powers that would define the German question. Who would lead the unification? By mid-century, revolutions swept across Europe. In 1848, German liberals, students, and workers rose in protest, demanding constitutions, rights, and national unity. For a moment it looked possible. A parliament assembled in Frankfurt, drafted a constitution, and offered the crown of a unified Germany to the King of Prussia. He refused. Too much blood in the street, too little power in the crown. The dream withered, until a new figure stepped forward, one not interested in dreams but in calculation. Otto von Bismarck. The Iron Chancellor of Prussia, Bismarck unified Germany not through speeches, but through war and realpolitik. Between 1864 and 1871, he orchestrated 3 conflicts against Denmark, Austria, and France. Each victory was surgical, nationalistic, and symbolic. And then in the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles, after crushing the French in the Franco-Prussian War, the German princes crowned Wilhelm IV as Emperor of a new German empire. Germany, unified, industrial, militarized, had arrived. Within a generation, it was a global force. Railroads stitched the empire together. Coal and steel powered the Ruhr. Science, engineering, and education became national obsessions. Thinkers like Kant, Hegel, Marx, and Nietzsche reshaped philosophy. Germany rivaled Britain in industry, France in culture, Russia in manpower. And yet unity did not bring ease. The new Germany was built with borders but no breaks. A constitutional monarchy under Prussian dominance, it retained authoritarian bones. The Reichstag existed, but the Kaiser commanded. Socialism was growing in the factories. Bismarck suppressed dissent with surveillance and welfare, social insurance to dull revolution. Still, Germany thrived. By the early 20th century, it had colonies, a navy, and ambitions that stretched beyond Europe. But beneath the steel and scholarship, an arms race was growing. Alliances were tightening, and the empire, barely 40 years old, was heading toward a storm that would rip the map apart again. The German nation had arrived, but its golden arc was built on tension, and the 20th century would test every rivet. In 1914, Germany marched into World War I with confidence, conscription, and cavalry. The empire was young, proud, and armed to the teeth. What followed was not triumph, but quagmire. Trenches from Flanders to Verdun, gas masks and artillery barrages, 4 years of slaughter that turned science into suffering. By 1918, Germany was starving. Its allies had fallen, its military cracked. Revolution broke out in the streets. The Kaiser abdicated, the empire collapsed. What emerged was the Weimar Republic, Germany's first democracy. But it was a fragile child, born in hunger and humiliation. The Treaty of Versailles in 1919 imposed crushing reparations and territorial losses. Germany was blamed for the war. Its economy bled. Hyperinflation shredded the middle class. Wheelbarrows of cash for a loaf of bread. In the vacuum, art exploded. Bauhaus, Dada, cabaret, jazz, even as violence simmered. Then came the crash. The Great Depression decimated German industry. Democracy faltered, extremists rose, and in 1933, a demagogue seized power with promises of restoration and vengeance: Adolf Hitler. The Third Reich turned Germany into a totalitarian war machine. Dissent was crushed, books burned, Jews, Roma, disabled people, communists, persecuted, then systematically murdered. The Holocaust, planned in offices and carried out in camps, remains one of humanity's most calculated atrocities. Germany unleashed World War II, blitzkrieging through Europe, building an empire of terror. But by 1945, it lay in smoking ruins, cities flattened, tens of millions dead. Hitler gone by suicide. The Nazi regime annihilated, Germany was not just defeated, it was dismantled. The Allies divided the country into 4 zones. In the west, the US, UK and France rebuilt. In the east, the Soviet Union imposed communism. Berlin, deep in Soviet territory, was split too, a scar inside a scar. In 1949, 2 Germanys were born. The Federal Republic of Germany, West Germany, capitalist, democratic, anchored to the west. The German Democratic Republic, East Germany, authoritarian, state-run, loyal to Moscow. In 1961, the division became concrete. The Berlin Wall rose overnight, razor wire and reinforced concrete, splitting streets, families and futures. East Germans trying to flee were shot. West Berlin became an island of neon and jazz behind the Iron Curtain. This was no longer just a national fracture. It was a global standoff, capitalism and communism eyeing each other across the bricks. For decades, Germany lived a split life. In the West, economic miracle, cars, NATO. In the East, surveillance, slogans and scarcity. 2 flags, 2 anthems, 2 realities. But beneath the division, memory festered. The Holocaust was not forgotten. It was debated, repressed, faced. Slowly, painfully, West Germany reckoned with its crimes. Memorials were raised, reparations paid, laws rewritten. In the East, surveillance grew. The Stasi recorded everything, millions of files on neighbours, lovers, teachers. The wall wasn't just a structure, it was an ideology, enforced with ink, guns and fear. And yet, even walls crumble. By the late 1980s, cracks were forming. Soviet power waned. East Germans protested. The Cold War cooled. In 1989, the Berlin Wall fell, not with a bang, but with a border guard too confused to say no. Crowds surged through. Families reunited. Champagne popped on the concrete. Germany was still scarred, but it was whole again. When the Berlin Wall fell in 1989, it was more than a border collapsing. It was a worldview shattering. East Germans didn't just cross into the West, they crossed into a different economy, a different culture, a different rhythm of life. Reunification followed swiftly. In 1990, the two Germanys became one. But it wasn't seamless. West Germany was richer, faster, wired into global markets. East Germany was older, poorer, still built around ration cards and central planning. Whole industries disappeared overnight. Unemployment surged in the East. Nostalgia and resentment, ostalgie, set in. And yet the country held. Berlin, once divided, became capital again, rebuilt as both memorial and metropolis. The government moved east, ministries merged, symbols clashed, a unified flag over a scarred Reichstag, the eagle of old reborn under new laws. But the past was not buried, it was excavated. Germany began one of the most profound reckonings in modern history. Monuments to the murdered Jews of Europe rose near Parliament. Schools taught the truth. War crimes were prosecuted into the 2000s.
A 96-year-old woman is on trial outside Hamburg, Germany, accused of being an accessory to the murder of thousands at a Nazi concentration camp. CBS's Charlie D'Agata is there and reports this could be the last trial of its kind.
The slogan wasn't triumph, it was never again. Economically, Germany surged. Fueled by engineering, exports, and fiscal discipline, it became Europe's largest economy. The Mittelstand, a dense web of family-run, high-skill manufacturers, powered everything from cars to medical tools. Mercedes, Siemens, Bosch, Bayer. Brands synonymous with precision, scale, and stability. Socially, it leaned progressive. Green parties rose. Unions remained strong. Renewable energy became national policy. Germany shut down nuclear plants, invested in wind and solar, and began rethinking industrialism itself. And in 2015, Germany made a global statement. As wars displaced millions across the Middle East and Africa, Chancellor Angela Merkel opened Germany's doors, welcoming over 1 million refugees. Her phrase, "Wir schaffen das," "we can manage this," became both a humanitarian call and a political fault line. Praise poured in. So did backlash. Yet Germany endured, not as a loud power, but as a reluctant one. It led Europe, often uneasily. It mediated crises, often quietly. It paid debts, shouldered blame, and remained wary of nationalism, even as it stirred across the continent. Reunification wasn't a reset. It was a reconstruction of geography, of economy, of memory. Germany hadn't erased its past. It had woven it into the architecture of its future. Today's Germany walks with quiet weight. It doesn't boast, but its influence is everywhere. In Brussels boardrooms, Davos forums, African infrastructure, Ukrainian weapons shipments, electric car supply chains. Germany is Europe's engine, cautious, calibrated, and often conflicted. Its population, over 84 million, is ageing, yet swelling through immigration. Turkish, Syrian, Polish, Kurdish, Nigerian, Afghan. Germany's cities speak in dozens of dialects. Berlin, once a Cold War punchline, now hums with startups, squatters, vegan cafes, and techno that pulses through abandoned bunkers. Yet east of the Elbe, small towns shrink. Trains don't always come. Old wounds haven't fully healed. Politically, Germany is still anchored to post-war humility. Its military remains deliberately modest. The Bundeswehr was long underfunded by design. But Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022 changed that calculus. Chancellor Olaf Scholz declared a Zeitenwende, a turning of the times. Billions were pledged to defence. German-made tanks rolled east, not in conquest, but support. It was a moment thick with historical irony and intent. Economically, Germany remains a titan. Its exports dominate: cars, chemicals, machines, ideas. But challenges mount. Global supply chains wobble. Energy needs scramble after the loss of Russian gas. The famed energy vendor, the shift to renewable power, pushes hard against the limits of grid infrastructure, weather and politics. And the shadows remain. Far-right movements have crept back into parliament. The AfD, once fringe, now polls in double digits in many states. Holocaust denial is illegal, but denial's modern cousins wear suits, use code words, and campaign on fear. Anti-immigrant rhetoric flickers in Saxony. Synagogues have armed guards, but so do mosques, so do pride events. Yet Germany, unlike many nations, does not bury its ghosts. In Berlin, stumbling stones, small brass plaques, glint between cobblestones, naming deported Jews where they once lived. At train stations, walls remember murdered Roma. Outside embassies, candles still burn for Ukrainian children abducted by war. Germany's identity is built on contradiction. It is progressive but pragmatic, haunted yet hopeful, guilty but generous. It has no founding myth, only a founding trauma. And that gives it a kind of moral gravity few other nations can claim. But as the climate shifts, alliances strain, and artificial intelligence begins reshaping work and war alike, Germany faces a challenge it cannot defer. How do you lead a continent when your history warns you never to lead alone? That question doesn't hang in speeches. It lives in policies, train schedules and coalition deals, in migrant shelters and manufacturing plants, in the careful way Germany speaks, never louder than history, and in the quiet understanding that the world still listens. Germany's next century won't be decided by tanks or treaties, but by demographics, decarbonisation, and digital drift. And the question hanging over it all is quiet but urgent. Can a nation built on caution navigate a world that's speeding up? The population is ageing fast, birth rates are low, rural villages hollow out while cities swell. The post-war economic miracle was built on skilled labour and long-term planning, both now in short supply. Immigration is no longer a political debate, it's a demographic necessity. But social cohesion strains under the weight of uneven integration, rising rent and political radicalism. At the same time, Germany faces the colossal task of reinventing its energy and industrial systems. It has vowed to be carbon neutral by 2045, an ambitious deadline for a nation still wired to coal in parts, reliant on gas in others. Nuclear is gone, wind and solar are rising. But the grid groans. Industries like car manufacturing, once untouchable, face existential questions from China's EV boom and global automation. Digitally, Germany lags. Wi-Fi dead zones still exist in train stations. Bureaucracy clings to fax machines and paper forms. Yet artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and cyber warfare don't wait for analog caution. The nation that invented the printing press now races to digitize its ministries. And geopolitically, Germany is no longer shielded by American guarantees or EU consensus alone. War in Ukraine forced it to rearm. China's economic entanglement tests its pragmatism, and climate migration is just beginning to reshape borders in new ways. Germany leads Europe, but leadership without dominance is a difficult posture to maintain in a world turning sharp-edged. Still, Germany has a unique weapon: historical memory as infrastructure. It does not mythologize the past, it excavates it, learns from it, teaches it. That humility, born of catastrophe, may be its strongest asset in an era of overconfidence and brittle populism. The next Germany may not be a different place, but it must become a different idea, a republic fluent in ethics, resilience, and reinvention. Not just exporting goods, but exporting a model for how to build a nation without forgetting how it broke.